Hello, my pups. Fourth time's the charm, because the three times before this, I've always lost the audio. But are you ready for chapter 3 of The One They Call Broccoli? Thank you again to the wonderful author of this fic, Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic is in the description below. And on to chapter 3. Chapter 3. Dad Zawa Sensei joined the team. Summary. Shota decides to join in on the training and he meets this mystery student. What will his impression on the kid be? And will Izuku manage to keep his dad from finding out the truth about him? Notes. Hello everyone. Oh boy, here we go. It's Aizawa time. Thank you so much for all the lovely comments and support. It really makes me so happy to see that so many enjoy this story so far. I really hope that you guys enjoy this chapter. Trigger warnings: neglect, crippling self doubt, feelings of unworth, also homelessness. Izuku has a home, but also not really. Izuku point of view. True to his words, Shota joined them for training the next morning. I just hope I don't make a fool of myself, Izuku thought, feeling very nervous when he saw his dad walk toward him across the beach. It was obvious that Shota tried to act indifferent, giving his best "I don't want to be here and couldn't care less about anything" attitude. And to most people, it probably worked. But Izuku noticed how alert those dark eyes were, and he noticed how they were currently watching him. Izuku tugged at the sleeves of his school gym clothes, feeling self-conscious under the other man's gaze. He wanted his dad to like him, after all. Izuku didn't know what he'd do if Shota didn't approve of him. All Might, hello. Who is this? Izuku asked, shyly looking up at Shota and shuffling a bit in place. This, Midoriya, is a good friend of mine. Izuku felt his lips tug a bit at the word friend. You probably haven't heard of him since he works underground, but he's a pro hero who goes by the name Eraserhead, All Might said, gesturing to Shota, who just nodded at him. Izuku really tried to hold back. He really, really tried. But after 2 long years of pent-up fanboying excitement, he suddenly exploded. After all, he was finally able to talk to his hero properly. Oh my god, Eraserhead? I'm such a big fan. Your quirk and fighting style is so cool, and it's amazing how you fight basically quirkless. Can I ask how your quirk works? I know it works on multiple targets at once, but does it work through glasses? Or is that why your goggles are such an interesting shape instead of having protective lenses? Oh, and what about your hair and scarf? How do they float like that? Is that actually part of your quirk too, or is it something else? And what about... Both men looked a bit shocked at his outburst, and All Might awkwardly cleared his throat, stopping Izuku in the middle of his ramble and gaining his attention. Sorry, Izuku mumbled, embarrassed that he might have gone a bit overboard. That's all right, Eraserhead said, looking almost overwhelmed. Also, you can call me Aizawa. I'm off duty, after all. Izuku smiled at that. Oh, okay, Aizawa-sensei. The name felt weird on his tongue, having grown used to calling the man Shota for so long. But he was still happy that the man wanted to share his name with him. Aizawa cleared his throat, gaining his attention. So, All Might told me you were quirkless? Both All Might and Izuku winced at the bluntness of that statement. Always straight to the point. Aizawa, All Might hissed, earning him a raised eyebrow from the man. It's fine, All Might. And yes, I am. That, Izuku said, looking down at the sand. I see. Well, that's exactly why I'm here, Aizawa said, standing a bit taller. Like you already said, I mostly fight quirkless, and I don't know what All Might has been teaching you, but I thought I would come over and see if I could help. Oh, thank you, Aizawa-san. We've mostly just been weightlifting, trying to build muscles and working on my stamina. Stuff like that, Izuku said. Anything else? Any hand-to-hand combat? Self-defense classes or fighting techniques? Aizawa asked. No, not really, Izuku answered honestly. Is that so? The man said, glaring slightly at All Might, causing the taller man to shrink back. Izuku wondered if he had said something wrong. This was exactly what I had been worrying about, Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temple. There's more to fighting than brute strength, especially if you don't have a quirk to rely on. Once again, Izuku found himself wondering why Toshi didn't just tell Shota the truth about his quirk, and he glanced slightly at All Might. Truth is, Izuku really wanted to let Shota in on One for All, but if Toshi didn't want that, then he guessed he'll just have to add it to his pile of many, many lies. What's one more, I guess? So with that said, Midoriya, Aizawa said, gaining Izuku's attention, would you like me to teach you some basic hand-to-hand combat? Izuku felt his eyes light up and he eagerly nodded, unable to keep the giant grin off his face. I'd be honored to, Aizawa-san, he exclaimed, leaning forward excitedly. Aizawa suddenly ducked his head into his capture weapon and turned his head. The sight made Izuku freeze, recognizing the meaning behind those crinkled eyes. Is he laughing at me? He thought, feeling a bit offended. It wasn't until slightly widened eyes met his own that Izuku realized that he had said that out loud, and he squeaked, slapping a hand over his mouth, and apologized to the man. No, it's fine. I was just surprised you could tell, Aizawa answered, brows furrowing. And I apologize. I wasn't laughing at you. It was just that you really reminded me of someone I know, the man explained, his eyes crinkling a tiny bit again. All Might grinned at that, turning towards Aizawa and shaking his shoulder. I told you that they look alike. Izuku felt himself blush at that statement. He realized they were probably talking about, well, him, but not him, his cat form him. God, this is gonna get so confusing. It was much easier when our lives were separated. Wanting to change the subject, Izuku just grinned awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. So, what's the plan for today? All Might and Aizawa, sensei? And so, Izuku's first lesson with Aizawa began. They started with just the basics, holding a good form, finding your balance, and stuff like that. After an hour of training with Aizawa, Izuku started his normal training with All Might and cleaned up the beach. At the end of it all, he was utterly exhausted. Happy, but exhausted. From that day on, Aizawa became a part of Izuku's training. He wouldn't join them every session, but a couple of times a week, the man would join them and teach Izuku how to fight properly and how to defend himself. And although the hand-to-hand combat lessons had started off gently, as soon as Izuku had the basics down and they started to actually spar, Aizawa was brutal. He'd heard Toshi, as well as some of their friends, tease Shota about being a strict teacher, but nothing could have prepared Izuku for how ruthless the man was. Though Izuku also got the feeling that Aizawa was probably holding back on him since he was so young. It made him shudder, feeling worried for his actual students. Needless to say, most sessions ended with Izuku having his ass kicked and, quite literally, eating sand. But no matter how many times the man threw him, Izuku always got right back up. He swore he could see an almost proud look in his teacher's eyes every time he got to his feet. Though that might just be wishful thinking. But Izuku did notice how he was lasting longer each time, something All Might encouragingly had pointed out. Which distracted Izuku just long enough for Aizawa to, again, make Izuku fall over into his face to painfully connect with the sand. Sorry, All Might called out sheepishly from his spot to the side. Aizawa sighed. You shouldn't let yourself get distracted. Even a second can be a matter of life and death. Izuku sat up and shook his head, making sand fly around him. Yes, sensei, he answered, standing up and getting back into position. Aizawa was observant. Not to say that All Might wasn't. The man was the number one hero, after all. But Aizawa was also a lot more direct, and he wasn't afraid to point out things that All Might would be too uncomfortable to say anything about. So it really shouldn't have been a surprise when Aizawa started asking Izuku about his home life. As soon as they were done for the day, Izuku collapsed into the sand, his limbs trembling. He didn't know how long he was just laying there, trying to catch his breath. But suddenly, something cold was touching his cheek, and Izuku startled and opened his eyes. He turned to see Aizawa crouched down next to him, holding a bottle of water against Izuku's face. The man looked slightly amused by Izuku's reaction. He hadn't even noticed the man had gone away to get them drinks, and Izuku shakingly sat up, accepting the water. Thanks, Izuku said, smiling at the man gratefully. Aizawa just hummed and moved to sit down on one of the freezers behind Izuku. Where's All Might? Izuku asked, looking around and not seeing his other mentor. He got a call. Said he would be back soon, Aizawa answered shortly. Izuku hummed at that and took a few chugs of water before laying it down in the sand next to him. Neither said anything for a while. It felt a bit awkward being alone with Aizawa like this. Often, All Might would be the one to fill out the silence, and while he was broccoli, it wasn't like Izuku had to hold an actual conversation. Out of habit, Izuku started to nervously fiddle with his shirt, wondering whether or not he should say something. He didn't want to annoy Aizawa after all. Izuku got the feeling that someone was watching him, and he looked up to see that Aizawa was frowning down at him. Is something wrong? Izuku asked, trying not to lean away from the stare. I was wondering why you were always wearing your school gym clothes, Aizawa answered, pointing at the tears starting to form from all the use. Izuku laughed a bit awkwardly. Well, I don't really have any training clothes, so I guess this was good enough, he said, staring down at the sand and fiddling with the material. He heard a sigh behind him, but the man didn't say anything else. Izuku's thoughts started to wander back to his mom. The truth was that he had clothes at his mom's place, but he wasn't about to tell Shota that he hadn't been there in months, and that all of his clothes were probably either sold by now or he had grown out of most of them. These really are getting kind of worn out, though. I wonder if I could ask the school for a new one, but they'll probably just say no anyway. Little did Izuku realize that he had thought that last bit out loud, and neither did he know that behind him, Aizawa's frown deepened as he continued to watch him. Shota and Toshi are acting weird. Broccoli was watching them from his place on top of the climbing tree in the living room. His two dads had been acting strange for a while now, probably ever since Shota joined in on Izuku's training. Or maybe Izuku was just imagining it? It felt like, no matter the form, Izuku and Broccoli had to constantly walk on eggshells these days. With how much he was interacting with his dad/mentors in both forms, all he could think about was how he was trying to not give anything away. He silently kept his eyes on his dads, wondering what they were up to. The two were currently sitting by the kitchen table with Shota's laptop in front of them, but from here, Izuku couldn't see what was on the screen. But he could still hear parts of their quiet conversation. Don't you think this is a bit inappropriate? It's not like he's our own kid, Shota sighed, tapping his finger against the table. Nonsense! Considering our suspicions, it is only logical for us to do this for him, right? Shota let out a deep sigh, leaning his head against Toshi's shoulder. I guess you have a point, he muttered, earning a grin from his partner. Besides, Shota continued with a frown, we can't exactly let him keep using those every day, especially if he doesn't have anything else to use in school. I'm just so pissed that no other adults are stepping in to help him, he snarled the last bit, looking very upset. Toshi looked a bit sad at that, and he reached an arm out to lay it around Shota's shoulders. Well, then it's a good thing we are here right now, right? He said softly, kissing Shota on top of his head. That earned him a sad smile from Shota. Yes, it is. Just what the heck are they talking about? Broccoli thought, squinting his eyes at them in suspicion. But just as he was about to climb down to go and find out, Slushy jumped up on the platform he was laying on. And before he even had time to react, his sister attacked him with her infamous cuddles. Slushy, no! Let me go! I was about to go on a mission! That tickles! His sister didn't care about his protests, though, and just kept cuddling him, holding him down with one paw and rubbing her head against his, purring loudly. Defeatedly, Broccoli laid down, accepting his fate. There was no escape from Slushy's cuddles, after all. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of Slushy purring and his dad's soft voices lull him into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, Izuku had completely forgotten about his dad's weird conversation, and for a few days, life continued as usual. That was until one early morning, before the sun had even risen above the horizon and the wind was cold, Aizawa handed Izuku a bag. Here, the man said gruffly, all but shoving the bag at Izuku. Confused, the boy took the bag and looked between Aizawa and All Might, not really knowing what to do. All Might smiled at him. Open it, my boy. It is yours, he said gently. With a small nod, Izuku hesitantly opened the bag and pulled out the contents. His eyes widened and he looked up at the two men in shock. You, this is. Why? All Might's eyes softened. Well, we noticed that you were in need of some new training gear, and so, as your mentors, we took it upon ourselves to get you some, he answered, smiling brightly. We weren't sure about the size, and if it's the wrong one, we can always trade it for another one. But no, I I can't accept these, Izuku said, clutching the brand new tracksuit to his chest. It's too much, he mumbled. Truth be told, Izuku hadn't owned new clothes in a long time. It wasn't like his mom bought him anything, and he also didn't have any money to buy things for himself. If it wasn't for the fact that he lived with Shota and Toshi and got food from them, Izuku wasn't sure what he'd be doing right now. He'd rather not dwell on it. He heard Aizawa sigh, breaking him out of his thought. It's no big deal, kid. Really. Just accept the damn gift and let's get started with the training, he said with a finality. It was clear he wouldn't take no for an answer. Izuku didn't like taking more from them, but he knew there was also no point in arguing with the man. So, with a shaking breath and a trembling smile, Izuku looked up at them. Thank you, he whispered, begging his tears to not fall just yet. He didn't want to cry in front of his mentors. All Might already teased him for being a crybaby after all. You're welcome, my boy. Now, what do you say? Ready to start training? All Might asked brightly, clapping Izuku on the back and almost making him fall over. Izuku just chuckled and looked up at the hero. Yes, sir, he answered, putting the bag and tracksuit away for later. After school, Izuku headed over to his secret hideout by the park. It was quite amazing how, even after 2 years, the rundown storage hut still stood just as untouched and unbothered as the day he found it. It laid a bit away from the main paths, surrounded by thick bushes and high grass. After looking over his shoulder one last time, Izuku removed one of the loose planks. He then dropped his backpack to the ground, took a deep breath, and briefly turned into his cat form. Being small like this, sneaking inside the narrow space was easy, and as soon as he was inside, he quickly turned back. From there, all he had to do was reach out his arm through the hole and pull his backpack inside. It just barely fit through the hole, and he was careful not to rip it against the sharp wood. The storage hut was small, and it had a single dusty window that worked as his only source of light. Mostly empty shelves were lining the walls. The only things having been left behind were some broken garden equipment and dirty tarp. But most importantly, it had a big vent, and inside the broken vent unit, there was a lot of space. Izuku's space. The boy smiled softly when he crawled over to the unit, and, with a practiced twist, the side fell off, revealing his treasure. Admittedly, there wasn't much. Just some clothes, books, a single All Might action figure, and of course, his school supplies. But it was his. And now, he had more stuff to add to it. Izuku couldn't keep the grin off his face when he turned towards his backpack and pulled out the bag he had gotten from Shota and Toshi that morning. He opened the bag and took a closer look inside, grinning when he pulled the soft fabrics out. They had gotten him a dark green tracksuit, along with a few extra t-shirts and a pair of shorts. This is way too much, Izuku found himself thinking for probably the 100th time today. His chest ached while he gripped the material of the tracksuit close to himself. He had no idea why they had decided to buy him this. Part of Izuku wondered if they would still have done it if they knew who he was. That kind of thought made him feel really guilty. It didn't feel like he deserved their kindness. Not after he had been lying to them and using them for years. But he also didn't want to be rude to them by not accepting the gift. After all, Midoriya Izuku had no reason to deny the gift, right? Broccoli was the one using them, not Izuku. That's why, instead of putting on his old PE uniform, Izuku carefully put on the tracksuit. When he pulled up the zipper of the tracksuit and looked down at himself, he couldn't stop the wide grin spreading along his face. Izuku hadn't even noticed he had started crying until he saw the tears hit the floor. He somehow managed to make it to the beach, just in time for their training. As soon as his mentors had seen him arrive in the new training clothes, they smiled brightly. Or, well, All Might smiled brightly. Aizawa had simply ducked his head into his capture weapon, but Izuku had noticed the way his eyes had crinkled when they landed on him. If either of his teachers noticed that Izuku's eyes were a bit red, neither of them mentioned it. Shota's point of view. At first, Shota hadn't been sure what to think of the kid. When Toshi confessed that he had started training some random, quirkless teen, Shota hadn't known what he had been expecting. Taking on private students as a pro wasn't that uncommon, though very rarely someone high up the ranks did it. But sometimes, children or young teens did something heroic that managed to catch a hero's attention, and then the hero would take them under their wing until they could enter heroics in high school. And according to what Toshi told him, this Midoriya kid had rushed in to save another boy from that slime villain. The kid had apparently, bravely, put his life on the line when no other pro would act. While Shota couldn't agree that the pros had acted correctly, he still didn't quite agree with Toshi enabling what could potentially lead to a very self-destructive behavior. Especially after he had learned that the damn kid was quirkless. So yes, when Shota went with Toshi to meet his student, he wasn't sure just what exactly he was expecting. But he certainly hadn't expected it to be a tiny child. Toshi had told him the boy was 14, but Shota found that very hard to believe. The kid was just too small and thin. It looked like the smallest of breezes could tip him over. But he didn't want to be too quick to judge. After all, Shota, if anyone, knew that there was more to being a hero than having muscles. And no sooner than a few minutes of having met the kid, Shota knew the boy might actually grow to be quite terrifying one day. The way his eyes had instantly locked onto Shota when they had entered the beach had Shota pause. There was something weirdly familiar about those green eyes. The damn kid even knew who he was, too. Not many people knew about Pro Hero Eraserhead. And Shota liked it that way. He certainly was not ready for the boy to start going on a crazy fanboy rant about his hero persona of all things. Shota tried to think back, trying to remember if he'd ever saved this kid on a mission or something. That would explain why the kid seemed familiar and why he knew about him as a hero. But trying to remember every single one of the people he had saved over the years was impossible and only gave him a headache. And it also just made him remember those he had failed to save, which is not something he wanted to think about right now. So, with a sigh, he simply decided not to dwell on it. When they began their training, Shota had warned Toshi about not getting too attached, especially since the kid wanted to go to UA and could potentially be one of their students. But as much as Shota hated to admit it, the kid was growing on him. Because for as tiny as the kid was, he was also extremely strong-willed, and more importantly, he was smart. Every time the kid stumbled, he would get right back up, analyze what he did wrong, and then do better. It had been a long time since Shota had a student showing so much conviction and potential. And well, it was hard not to get attached. Even though Shota was technically done with his part of the training, he still liked to stay and supervise when Toshi held his part of the program. That way, he and Toshi could also walk home together afterwards. It turned out to be a good thing that he had decided to stay behind this particular evening. Because no later than 5 minutes after Toshi's training had begun, the man had gotten an emergency call and had to leave early. Midoriya had insisted on staying and continuing to train on his own. At that, Toshi had seemed conflicted, which Shota didn't blame him for. These tall and heavy garbage piles could easily send the kid to an early grave if they weren't careful. So, of course, Shota had volunteered to stay and supervise the kid. And so, here he was, leaning against an old truck on a beach filled with garbage while he made sure the kid didn't get himself killed. How did my life turn out like this? Midoriya threw another microwave at the back of the truck, and the boy leaned his head against the side of the vehicle, taking a short breather. Shota was leaning against the truck, his arms crossed, and considered him for a moment. They'd been training for months, and not once did the boy falter or show any signs of wanting to give up. Even when he was pushed way over his limit, he still looked determined to do more. Not for the first time, Shota wondered what motivated him. Most of his students would start to slack off long before they reached this point. Shota turned his gaze to look out at the coast. The sun was already setting in the horizon, coating everything in an orange and pink hue. He found himself wondering if Toshi would be back soon, if the man was okay. Why do you want to be a hero? He found himself asking. Midoriya jolted from his spot next to the truck, but he didn't answer. Why do you want to be a hero? Shota repeated, turning his gaze away from the water and instead looking directly at Midoriya, meeting those brilliant green eyes. When the question finally registered, the boy stood up taller, setting his mouth in a straight line. I want to save those without a voice, those who are shunned by society and who can't fight back. I want to be an underground hero who saves those who have given up on being saved. Shota was honestly a bit taken aback by that. You want to be an underground hero? I would have imagined you'd want to be like All Might, like all the other damn kids these days. He didn't add. Izuku just shook his head, though. Don't get me wrong, All Might is amazing, but I know I can't be like him, nor do I want to. He's trying to save everyone, but that's impossible. Those at the bottom are always left behind, so I want to be the one who picks them up. I I want to be like a Razorhead. The kid said it with so much conviction, eyes basically burning with passion. And again, those eyes were so damn familiar. Hey, kid, I've been meaning to ask you for a while now. Have we met before? Shoda asked, studying the kid. Midoriya's smile faltered a bit at that, but he seemed to quickly recover. Yes, actually. You saved me a few years ago, the boy answered quietly, looking away. Before Shota could answer, Midoriya continued. I I've always wanted to thank you for so long, but I never got the chance. So, thank you, Aizawa-san, for saving me back then and for, well, everything, the boy said, meeting his eyes. Not sure what to say to that, Shota just nodded. No problem, kid. Glad I was there to save you that day. And God, that damn smile was damn near blinding. I'm glad you were there too, Aizawa-sensei. Okay, Shota could definitely see why Toshi had gotten so attached. This kid is adorable. After they had gone to bed that night, Shota turned so he was facing Toshi. How much do you know about Midoriya's family? He asked quietly. Toshi looked a bit taken aback by the question, and he seemed to consider it. Not much, he answered slowly. I know he's mentioned a mother before, but never a father. For some reason, he prefers not to talk about his home life. Why? He asked, looking at Shota. So? Toshi asked, squinting his eyes at him. How would you feel about fostering? Shota mumbled. Toshi sputtered at that. You can't be serious, he asked, a smile spreading on his lips and voice sounding amused. Shota felt his face grow warm, and he groaned, burying it in his hands. You can't blame me for wanting to take care of the kid. After all, you were the one starting to bring him lunchboxes every day, he muttered, lowering his hands. Yes, but, well, I'm not the one who said, and I quote, don't get attached to the damn kid, Toshi chuckled. Should have just huffed and rolled his eyes at that. Yes, yes, I know, he sighed. But you've noticed it too, right? The kid never wears clothes other than those from his school or the ones we gave him. He could be homeless for all we know. I can't deny that I've also thought of the possibility, Toshi said softly. But if he does have parents, then we need to find out more about them first. If there is no evidence of abandonment or abuse, then there's not much we can legally do. Shota let out a soft chuckle at that and scooted closer. So you want to keep him too? Have been since the start. Unfortunately, what they didn't know at the time, looking up Inko and Hisashi Midoriya would turn into a long journey filled with many dead ends and much frustration. Author's notes. Aizawa is sus about Midoriya, but he can't put his finger on what. But really, can you blame him for not immediately jumping to the conclusion that this human child is also his cat? Ah, yes, Shota and Toshi are already set on adopting the sad child. Does our dear cat kid know that? Nope. Would he believe them even if they told him? Probably not. And with Inko alive, things won't be so easy for them. You'll see why later in the story. But emotionally, they are already starting to see Izuku as their own kid. Thank you again, everyone, for all the support and lovely comments. It makes me so happy that so many are enjoying the silly story so far. Next chapter, Izuku will visit UA. Just who might he meet there? Hope you'll look forward to it. And that's a wrap on chapter 3. This is the fourth time reading it. Fingers crossed I won't need to read it for a fifth time. Um, I did have to switch voice recording platforms, so I hope that the quality is still as good. And if it's not, I'll work on finding another one. But trying to voice record on CapCut, the video would just not save. And so I lost progress twice. Um, Sorry for my lisp. I've listened back to the last two chapters and it's very noticeable. Also, what's noticeable is my desk's a little squeaky whenever it moves. So, sorry about that. I was also gonna say sorry for any long pauses. I I pause the recording sometimes because I have like a migraine right now, which is fine. Um, but please show the original author Texiliaz some love. Link to the fic is in the description, like I said at the beginning of the video. I hope that you all enjoyed this. Leave a comment if you'd want to. Tell me how I did. And I'll see you next time, pups. Bye bye.